Hi students, today I am going to teach you T.S. Eliot, and that too particularly the great poem, epical poem, The Waste Land. And we will start this lecture from this very important quote which is said by Wordsworth. And what Wordsworth has said? Every great poet is enjoyed by the taste he has created. These lines have been said by Wordsworth, and the remark is actually applicable to T.S. Eliot and his entire collection of poetry. Suppose if we talk about the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which was written somewhere between 1910 and 1911. This poem has been described as the richest of the early poems and as the poem that has a middle-aged man with a romantic outlook, with a romantic fervor. And who is Prufrock? Who is he? He is a tragic figure, and his tragedy remains of a man whom love is beyond achievement, but is still within the desire. Fine. So, you have to just concentrate that what is this wasteland about, because this is a great poem and it is believed that every student has to know this poem particularly in detail. So that is why I am going to take this poem in detail. Now, the wasteland, students, has five sections, or we can say movements. The first of which introduces the main themes, which are developed with a lot of variations in the second and the third, while the fourth is short and even grave and slow, and an impressive culmination in the fifth section. If we talk about the opening movements, or the section of the poem which has been called the burial of the dead, we are given a series of contrasted scenes. The poem being with the representation and the description of April. And April, we know, it is considered to be the month of rebirth, as not the most joyful season, but taken as the cruelest. So this description is a sort of comment on the cruelty of the springtime and the pain of the new life stirring after winter. And if you remember, students, I still remember the poems which I have been teaching past decades, that is the wasteland. That is why it is in the fingertips. And what are those lines? April is the cruelest month breeding. Lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory with desire, stirring the dull roots with the spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in a forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dry tubers. So this is the starting and the beautiful lines of the great poem, The Wasteland. And students, this description of April in the wasteland must be contrasted to the Chaucer's description of April in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, which I hope you must all be knowing. जिसमें याद करिए वो लाइन है, it is just the contradiction. When that April with his showers shoots, the drought of March purged to the root and bathed every vein in which liquor of which virtue engendered is the flower. Fine. So see the contradiction in terms. And after a song from Tristan and Isolde, Tristan and Isolde, and the lines about the girl with the hyacinth, which with we are introduced to Madame Sosostris. Madame Sosostris, we are introduced in the poem, and it is the duty of Madame Sosostris to tell people about their future, and the suggestion is that the act of fortune telling is certainly a falling off from the high function of her predecessors. She mentions among her clients one, the drowned Phoenician sailor, the symbol of the fertility god whose image was drowned in the sea, to be later recovered with the outset of the spring season. And modern Sosostris warns him against death by water. And the suggestion is that the inhabitants of the wasteland, they actually fear the regenerating power of water. So, from the parlor of modern Sosostris, we pass to the crowds flowing over the great London Bridge, a bridge in the unreal city, and the city which has been described as unreal. Why? Because it is spiritual sources of life, and because it has no longer has anything of its old sense of community, and each individual exists in loneliness, in alienation, and the mass flowing over that bridge has no more of human identity than the river flowing under it. And as the crowd which is moving through the street of wintry London, as dark at 9, as at dawn on its way, presumably to jobs in the office and the shops, and the protagonist recognizes one man, and the name of that man is Stetson, and asks him this terrifying question. And what is this question, students? That corpse you painted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? क्या वो bloom करेगा इस साल? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its its bed? So, the suggestion of this terrifying question is that the corpse which was planted last year cannot sprout forth into the new life like the fertility god consigned to the river. And the burial of the dead is now a satire planting without any hope. And dear students, ये तो हो गई आपकी first उसकी बात section की. Now if I talk about the second section, that is the game of chess, the sterility, the meaningless of life in the wasteland has been brought home to us by means of the portrayal of the two types of modern women in contrasted literary styles. And the pictures that the poet has drawn shows the contrast between a life in a rich and a very magnificent setting, and the life in a rich and a vulgar setting of a London pub. Both scenes are scenes taken from the contemporary wasteland, and in both of them, students, life has actually lost its meaning. And the title of the second section of this poem, that is The Game of Chess, has some echoes with the game of chess in the Middleton's play. And Middleton का play का क्या नाम था? ये क्वेश्चन भी पूछा जाता है. मिडिल्टन का प्ले था Women Beware Women. You remember this thing. So the title of the second section, that is The Game of Chess, is echoing the game of the chess in the Middleton's drama play Women Beware Women. And in this play, the game is used to act as a device to keep the widow occupied with her daughter and daughter-in-law. And while that widow is occupied with the game of chess, that daughter-in-law is being seduced. And this game of chess, that is the chess, is the game which in this poem is used as a symbol for the meaninglessness of life. And the third section of the poem, which has been called the fire sermon. The fire sermon. This section reminds us of the sermon of, हमें किस की याद दिलाता है? The sermon of Buddha, and it recalls the river of Spencer's Prothalmion, in which the scene of the river side is dominated by nymphs. अगर आपने पढ़ा हो तो आपको याद आ जाएगा that the river side is dominated by nymphs and their paramours मतलब होता है lovers, preparing for the bridal. And the paramours of the Spencer's time have left, and in their place we are told about their loitering airs of city directors and the skill handkerchief, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends that lie scattered in the river Thames. This bears testimony to the fact to their summer night enjoyment. So this is a very clear-cut conception and the figure about the scenery there. And the passage which talks about the typist girl and the young man suggests that in this modern society, in this modern wasteland, the relation between a man and a woman is actually full of agony and full of satire. And if we read a very careful reading of the passage, we will find or we will feel that it is depicting the theme of lust basically in a very ironical manner. And in portraying the characteristic scenes between the typist and the clerk, we feel a deliberate mechanization of this rhythm. And the line from Goldsmith in the following passage, which should be read by you, or which I am going to tell you, the passage you should remember, that is very internationally known lines in English literature. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone. These lines basically points out the meaninglessness of the loss of chastity today, and the record on the gramophone like the liking of the human heart with the throbbing of a taxi, emphasizing the automatic, the mechanical nature of the sexual performance which has been done few minutes before. And we are also introduced to the river Thames, the daughters whose song brings us back to the opening lines sections of the fire sermon. And the Thames daughters are the victims of fraud, of their own story of lust and outrage. And of the three of the Thames daughters, the first girl tells us that she has been undone by a person known as Richmond, and the girl who paces the movement at Moorgate, treading on her own heart, has in more senses than one lost herself the respect. And the girl who slits on the Moorgate stands sits among the humble, expecting nothing. So the third girl story suggests the utter disillusion prevalent in the wasteland. At the close of this section, we are made aware of the world of purgation. And what is that world of purgation, students? Burning, 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 burning. Everything is burning. And this section, the fire sermon, ended with the possibility of the purification or the purgation, and the possibility of purification provides the central theme of the fourth section, and that is death by water. Death by water.